Is there some sort of a protocol that the DOJ has to follow when they decide what they should or shouldn't redact?
Well, this is a unique situation. The protocol here is really in the act of Congress that was passed. It sets out in great detail what they're supposed to produce and what they're permitted to redact. And the redactions are supposed to be limited to victim identifying information, what's known as CSAM, or essentially child pornography, national security or classified information, and some other kind of images of death or injury and that sort of thing. The act also specifically says you cannot redact the names of people other than victims for purposes of embarrassment or, potential people that they looked into as suspects, which is very unusual, let's make that clear, but there is now a law on the books that is telling them this is what they have to do.
So it sounds like, according to the mandate or the law, there's very little that they could, according to their discretion, redact, right? It would be like CSAM sensitive materials, essentially, right?
Yes. I will say, though, in his letter to Congress, the Deputy Attorney General, Todd Blanche, I think very interestingly put that the department was going to withhold certain documents on the basis of 3 privileges: the deliberative process privilege, the attorney-client privilege, and the work product privilege, which signals to me that they are not planning to produce the most useful documents, which would be things like the prosecution memo, draft indictments, internal communications about who to charge and whether to charge people and who to investigate, which, again, the act that Congress passed specifically requires them to produce those documents.
So I'm starting to see this end up in the court system, essentially, right?
Potentially.
Invoking all these privileges that you're talking about, right?
Yes. I think what Congress might try to do first is, there's been talk of holding the Attorney General in contempt or even articles of impeachment. I think a lot of this is about putting pressure now on the Department of Justice to speed things up, to speed up their disclosure of documents, and to potentially produce more than what they intended to initially.
Well, the grand jury testimony, Nadia, is heavily redacted. And there's more black on that page than any space left. And so how broad, when we're talking about the grand jury transcript, how broad is the discretion of the DOJ to redact the grand jury transcript? I mean, one of the things I noticed is that some of the victims' names who wanted to be anonymous were actually not redacted. Like you said, they should have been redacted. Yeah. And then it seems to me like perpetrator names were redacted. So when we're talking about the grand jury transcript, is there a specific criteria for that?
I think, again, it's based on what the law says here. And they should obviously be redacting victim names. If they didn't, that's a clear mistake and failure, and I assume unintentional. But I understand that they re-released some of the grand jury material that was completely blacked out, has now been released. It looks like the Southern District of New York was using the grand jury less as an investigative grand jury and more as just going to seek an indictment and using an FBI agent or a detective as a summary witness. So I'm not sure that the grand jury transcripts are where actually the really useful information is going to be.
It would be in those memos.
The memos, FBI 302s, which are reports of interviews. And also, something I don't think we've seen yet is affidavits in support of search warrants. Those often lay out the evidence at that time in the investigation in detail to convince a judge that there's probable cause.
Why we need to go and search this person's home because this person did X and Y. Yeah, that's the real, setting aside the left versus right, the political arguments on each side, is the drawn-out timing of the release in this drib and drab format, do you see this as a legal problem? Is this going to end up in court?
I mean, it very well could. I think this Department of Justice doesn't seem to be concerned about that. They, in many matters, don't seem to be concerned about the courts, and I think they are kind of calling Congress's bluff to see if they're going to enforce the act in any way.
All of that takes time. What is the end game in all of this? I mean, what can we expect to eventually see? Because at the end of the day, these victims have waited a long time to learn more about, justice in this case. So what is the end game?
I mean, I think the end game that was expected is full transparency to the extent possible. Whether we're actually going to see any more criminal prosecutions, I'm skeptical. I don't have a lot of faith in this current Department of Justice to be bringing additional charges. I also think, the original prosecutors in the Southern District of New York who looked at this in 2019 and 2020, I think they were very good prosecutors. One of them was fired by the Department of Justice recently. And so it's hard for me to see there being new prosecutions.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.